Okay, talk to me about Heart Boss. Let's
Sure.
just kind of start there. And what I'm curious about before we kind of get into the content of the book
Yeah.
is I'm curious about kind of why. I often feel like sometimes these things are like, they're like things you got to get out of you. Like they're like
Mhm.
in you. And like sometimes you can't even, I don't even know if we're like in control of what's happening. It's just like happening. That's been my experience. But I'm curious, like, what was your experience with why, the kind of the why write this book?
Yeah. So it's interesting because the why actually started about the time I met you, because my life was going through such a major transformation. Like, as you know, I left my first husband. I was in after that, I got into a relationship with a woman that was completely unexpected. I lost my job. All of these things happened pretty quickly. And it was then that I started actually journaling and writing notes because I was like, wow, these stories are amazing and they're kind of hard to believe. And I should write this down and I should write a book someday. So I actually have a file with an old table of contents that I created back in 2008 or 2009-ish. And some of those stories are part of Heart Boss. So for me, it was like, wow, we can do hard things. And the more people share their stories about, being resilient and having courage and taking the best step for them versus for doing things for other people, the better we're all off. So for me, it was important to share my lessons and my story to hopefully help other people do exactly the same thing in their journey.
Yeah, I've thought about writing a book myself, and I'm in a bunch of masterminds where people write books, and there's publishers, and there's a lot of discussion about it, and it feels like something that I will someday do. But I think the kind of idea of it and then the actual doing it are two very different things, right? Like
it's a total grind. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, my belief, and this is why we do the podcast, is that everybody has a story. And those stories are really helpful for other people to hear because we're all the same in some way, shape, or form, right? So, I mean, not every guest might land with the listener, or some listeners different from others, but there are people out there that will relate to your story. The thing that is fascinating for me is not everybody will actually write it, right? Not everybody will even talk about it. Not everybody's willing to share it. So, before we get into like the grind of writing a book, which I do want to talk about, like what that's like. I'm curious to kind of hear more about like what really compels you. Like, how do you get from I have a story, I've got these notes, to like, I'm actually going to do this thing? It seems like it takes a lot of courage to do that.
For me, it was always thinking about it. So I knew, and Glennon Doyle, I don't know if you've ever followed her, read her work, but she always says, like, if you're thinking about it and you can't get it off of your mind, like that's the thing you have to go and do. And so for me, this book has been on my heart for 20 some years. And over the last 20 years, I have been adding stories to that and gaining experience. So for me, it was as simple as that. Like it was on my heart. It was on my mind. I'm somebody that loves to tell stories, right? And it was just for me, something natural that I had to do because it's something that I enjoy deeply.
Yeah. And it's really, one of the themes of the book is trusting your gut, having that courage. So, it's interesting, that, you're, and this is what I love about the book and kind of why I am really interested in it is kind of because I believe in the way that you're telling stories. I believe the way that you're teaching people is by telling your story. You are an example of what you're teaching, right? You're not somebody who intellectually understands this. This has been your life learning, right? And so when you talk about trusting your gut and courage, right? And it might be, in any number of the steps along the way, the job, the marriage, the, difficult conversations, you also had to do that exact same thing to share this story.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think it's the power of telling story. I learn from hearing other people's stories, right? That's what it compels me to keep moving forward. And for me, I just knew like when it comes to trusting your gut, so many of us are afraid to listen to those whispers, or we're afraid of what we think other people will say or think or do because of what it is we want. And when you boil it down, no one's actually thinking about you the way in which you think they are, right? We're all kind of stuck in our own heads. We're stuck in this place where, it's kind of like a paralysis. And when you boil it down, no one's thinking about you. You just need to follow your gut, do what's right for you, and continue to take those next steps. It's as simple as that.